Eleanor Mitchell nearly died on her kitchen floor because she refused to believe that something as simple as her morning coffee could betray her. At 72, stubborn and alone, she had clung to her decades-old routine like a lifeline, dismissing her doctor's warnings as unnecessary interference in the one comfort she had left. But her body had other plans, and what happened that terrifying morning forced her to face a truth she'd been avoiding. Survival isn't just about waking up, it's about choosing to truly live. Listen to how one woman's near death over coffee became the unexpected turning point that restored not just her health, but her reason to keep going. Eleanor Mitchell's fingers wrapped around the cold edge of the kitchen counter as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the thin curtains. The clock blinked 5:47 a.m. in harsh red digits. She had woken at this exact time every morning for 30 years, her body refusing rest even when her mind begged for it. Her hand trembled as she reached for the coffee maker, arthritis making each movement ache. At 72, this morning ritual had sustained her through 3 decades of widowhood, through Sarah's departure to California, through the endless parade of empty days. The rich aroma that filled the kitchen as the machine gurgled to life was her only comfort, the one constant in a life that had stripped away everything else. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Sarah. "Mom, did you do your stretches before coffee? Remember what Dr. Chen said?" Eleanor felt irritation rising hot and bitter in her chest. She deleted the message with more force than necessary. Stretches, as if bending her arthritic body before caffeine would somehow transform her existence. Dr. Chen had been insistent 3 weeks ago about morning routines and blood sugar, but Eleanor had politely nodded and promptly forgotten the advice. She reached for her favorite mug, the ceramic one with the chipped handle that Robert had given her decades ago. It was the last survivor from a set they'd picked out together, all the others broken over the years. She poured the steaming liquid, watching it fill almost to the brim. The first sip burned her tongue, scalding hot, but Eleanor welcomed the pain. It was real, unlike the hollow promises of doctors who claimed that morning movement could change everything. At her age, nothing changed. You simply endured. She took another sip, then another, drinking faster than she should. The coffee was too hot, but she didn't care. She moved to the small kitchen table that used to seat 4, but now held only 1 chair. She sat down heavily and wrapped both hands around the mug. Halfway through the cup, she felt it, a sharp twist in her stomach, sudden and vicious, as if someone had reached inside and wrung her insides like a wet towel. Eleanor gasped, setting the mug down with a clatter. The pain intensified, spreading through her chest. Then came a wave of nausea so powerful it blurred her vision. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The room tilted sickeningly. Eleanor stumbled, reaching blindly for support. She needed the bathroom, needed to sit down, but her body was betraying her. The mug teetered and slipped from the table, shattering against the tile floor. Coffee spread across the white tiles like dark blood. Eleanor's vision blurred completely. She couldn't find the bathroom, couldn't find anything. Her hand found the wall and she collapsed against it, sliding down to the floor. The room spun violently, her heart hammered with irregular, frightening beats. Too fast, then too slow, then too fast again. This wasn't normal. This was something worse, something terrifying. Through the haze of panic, Eleanor fumbled for her phone in her robe pocket. Her fingers, clumsy and uncooperative, finally found it. She pressed the emergency button. 911. What's your emergency? Eleanor's voice came out barely a whisper. Help. Can't breathe. Heart. She managed to gasp out her address before her hand went limp, the phone sliding from her grasp. The kitchen floor was cold against her cheek. Through her failing vision, she could see the coffee still spreading, the broken pieces of Robert's mug scattered among the liquid. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The emergency room was bright lights and urgent voices. When Eleanor fully surfaced, she was in a hospital bed with an IV line in her arm. Dr. Chen stood at the foot of her bed, her face grave. Eleanor, you gave us quite a scare. Eleanor's throat was raw. What happened? Dr. Chen pulled up a chair. Your blood sugar dropped dangerously low. Combined with the coffee on an empty stomach, it triggered a severe reaction. Your heart showed signs of stress. If this continues, we're looking at serious complications. I don't understand, Eleanor whispered, her voice hoarse from the oxygen mask they'd removed an hour earlier. "I've had coffee every morning for 50 years. Your body has changed," Dr. Chen explained. "At your age, your metabolism is different. Your cortisol levels peak in the morning, and coffee amplifies that, suppressing your appetite further. You're not eating breakfast, are you?" Eleanor looked away. "Breakfast felt pointless when you ate alone." "Here's what's happening," the doctor continued firmly but compassionately. "When you drink coffee first thing, it spikes your cortisol and adrenaline. For seniors with fragile systems, this creates a cascade effect. Your blood sugar crashes, your heart rate becomes erratic, and your body goes into stress mode. Over time, this has been weakening you." "So what am I supposed to do?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "Stop drinking coffee? That's all I have left." "No," Dr. Chen said gently, "but you need to change the order. Morning stretches, even gentle ones, activate your muscles and stabilize your blood sugar naturally. Then eat something, even if it's small. Then coffee. Your body needs preparation." Eleanor wanted to argue, but the memory of that bathroom floor, of the terror that she might die alone surrounded by broken ceramic, silenced her. "We're keeping you overnight for observation. I've called Sarah. She's catching the first flight out." Sarah arrived 8 hours later, rushing into the room with her carry-on still over her shoulder. Her face was tight with worry and anger. "Mom, why didn't you listen?" The words came out sharper than intended. "I've been telling you for months what the doctor said." "Because it seemed ridiculous," Eleanor shot back, tears forming. "I'm 72 years old, Sarah. Stretching before coffee isn't going to fix my life. It isn't going to bring your father back. It isn't going to make you stay." The room fell silent. Sarah's expression softened, and she took her mother's hand. "Mom, I know you're lonely. I know everything feels meaningless. But you almost died yesterday, over coffee. Don't you see how preventable this was?" Eleanor turned her face away, but Sarah continued. "The doctor explained it to me. At your age, your body can't handle the stress of caffeine on an empty system anymore. It's not about fixing your life. It's about keeping you in it." Sarah's voice thickened with emotion. "I need you to try. Even if it feels pointless, please try." Eleanor looked at her daughter and saw the exhaustion, the worry, the love beneath the frustration. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll try." Sarah leaned forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, careful of the IV lines. Eleanor held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent, feeling the solid reality of her presence. They stayed like that for a long moment, mother and daughter, holding on to each other while machines beeped their steady rhythms, and the world continued outside. Eleanor returned home 3 days later, Sarah helping her through the front door, with a protective hand on her elbow. After her daughter's taxi disappeared down the street, Eleanor walked slowly into her kitchen. The brown stain was still there on the white tile floor, a dark shadow where her coffee had spilled. She had expected Sarah to clean it, but her daughter must have left it deliberately. Eleanor stood staring at the stain for a long time, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. It looked like a Rorschach test, the coffee having spread in irregular patterns. It was a monument to her stubbornness, a marker of the moment when her body had finally rebelled, a memorial to her near death. She could scrub it away, but something stopped her. Maybe she needed to see it every morning as a reminder of what happened when she refused to adapt. That first morning back, she woke before dawn as always at 5:47 a.m. Her body ached for coffee with an almost physical need. The craving was so strong, it made her hands shake. She could smell it in her memory, could feel the warm ceramic of her mug, could taste that first bitter, perfect sip. But she forced herself to remember the hospital bed, the monitors beeping their warnings, the oxygen mask pressed against her face, the fear in Sarah's eyes, the cold reality of how close she had come to dying, alone on her kitchen floor. Eleanor stood in her living room instead of going straight to the kitchen. She felt awkward and self-conscious despite being completely alone. The living room was rarely used anymore, furniture arranged for conversations that never happened, for guests who never came. She had the instruction sheet Dr. Chen had given her, practically memorized now. She unfolded it and placed it on the coffee table where she could see the simple line drawings. Following the sheet, she began to stretch. Gentle shoulder rolls first. She lifted her shoulders toward her ears, held them for a count of 3, then rolled them backward in slow circles. The movement felt stiff, awkward, Her joints protested, decades of arthritis making themselves known. 5 repetitions, then slow neck rotations. She tilted her head to the right, feeling the pull along the left side of her neck. Muscles she hadn't consciously engaged in years stretched and complained. She held it for 10 seconds, breathing through the discomfort, then tilted left, forward, backward, carefully. It felt absurd. A 72-year-old woman standing alone in her dusty living room at dawn, moving her head in circles. She felt ridiculous, like she was play-acting at self-care. Next, reaching for her toes. Eleanor bent forward at the waist, her hands sliding down her thighs. She barely made it past her knees before her hamstrings screamed in protest and her lower back seized up. The drawing showed the figure touching their toes easily. Eleanor couldn't even see her feet. It felt like surrender, like admitting defeat, like accepting that her body was old and broken and would never be what it once was. But as she moved through the sequence, something unexpected began to happen. Her body started to wake up. Not with the violent jolt of caffeine hitting an empty system, not with the artificial alertness that coffee had provided. This was different. This was gentler, more organic, more real. Her joints loosened incrementally with each movement. The stiffness that had greeted her every morning for years began to ease. Her breathing, which had been shallow and anxious, deepened naturally as she focused on the stretches. Air filled her lungs more completely than it had in longer than she could remember. She moved to arm circles, standing with her feet hip-width apart, extending her arms out to the sides. Her shoulders burned, but beneath the burn was warmth, blood flow, life. By the time she finished the full sequence, 15 minutes had passed. Eleanor stood in her living room, slightly breathless, but in a good way. She realized with surprise that she felt more alert, more present, more awake than she had felt in months, maybe years. Her body felt like it was actually part of her again, instead of just a prison she was trapped in. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, could feel the slight warmth in her muscles from the movement. Eleanor walked to the kitchen, moving past the brown stain without looking at it this time. She made herself eat before even looking at the coffee maker. Half a banana, peeled carefully and eaten in small bites. A handful of almonds, counted out precisely. Nothing elaborate, but something. Fuel. The food felt strange in her stomach after so many years of starting the day empty. But she chewed slowly, focused on the texture, the taste. The banana was sweet and soft. The almonds were crunchy, slightly bitter. Then finally she made her coffee. Her hands moved through the familiar motions. 4-level scoops, the gurgle of the machine, the rising aroma. She poured it into a different mug this time, not Robert's chipped one. That one was gone. She had chosen a plain white mug from the back of the cabinet, one that carried no memories. A fresh start. The first sip was different. Without the harsh assault on her empty system, without her body desperately craving the caffeine to function, she could actually taste it. Really taste it. The richness she had always claimed to savor, but had actually been gulping down too fast to appreciate. The subtle notes of chocolate and earth, the slight bitterness balanced against the smooth finish. It wasn't a lifeline anymore. It wasn't a necessity for survival. It was simply coffee. Good coffee, pleasant coffee, coffee she could enjoy rather than need. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table with the white mug cradled in her hands and felt something shift inside her chest. Something small but significant. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor maintained the routine with grim determination at first. She didn't do it because she believed it would transform her life or because she had suddenly found hope. She did it because the alternative was death or another hospitalization, and she had seen the fear in Sarah's eyes. So every morning she woke at 5:47. Every morning she stood in her living room and moved through the stretches. Every morning she forced herself to eat something small. And then, only then, she had her coffee. But slowly, imperceptibly, things began to shift. The morning stretches, which had felt like torture at first, started to feel less awful. Her body began to anticipate them, to respond more readily. The stiffness that had defined her mornings for years gradually eased. She could reach a little farther toward her toes each day. Her neck rotated with less grinding sensation. The stretches left her with energy she hadn't felt in years. Not frantic energy, not the artificial buzz of caffeine, but real energy, sustainable energy, the kind that made her feel capable. 2 weeks after returning home, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in over a decade. After her stretches and breakfast and coffee, she walked to the front door, slipped on her shoes, and went outside for a walk. Not a long walk, just to the end of her street and back, maybe 10 minutes total. But the neighborhood looked different in morning light than it had through her kitchen window. The trees were greener, the sky was larger. The world felt more real, more present. She started taking short walks after breakfast, gradually extending them as her body grew stronger. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 15. She walked past houses she had lived near for 45 years, but had never really seen. 3 weeks into her new routine, she ran into Margaret Collins. Margaret lived 4 houses down, a tall woman with steel gray hair, always pulled back in a practical bun. Eleanor had exchanged waves with her for a decade, but they had never spoken beyond brief hellos. Margaret was also a widow, Eleanor knew. Also alone, also in her 70s. "You're up early," Margaret said, pausing in her own walk. She carried a water bottle and wore proper walking shoes. "New habit," Eleanor replied, suddenly self-conscious. "Doctor's orders, actually." Margaret smiled with understanding. "Want company? I walk every morning. Gets boring alone." And just like that, they started walking together. It began simply. They would meet at the corner at 7 a.m., walk the neighborhood loop together, exchange pleasantries about the weather or neighbors. But gradually, as days passed, their conversations deepened. "I almost died a month ago," Eleanor admitted one morning as they paused at the top of the hill. "Over coffee, of all things." Margaret laughed, but her eyes were understanding. "The ridiculous things that nearly take us out. I fell in my bathroom last year reaching for my pills before turning on the light. Broke my wrist in 2 places, spent 6 weeks in a cast. Taught me that taking an extra 30 seconds to flip a switch can save your life." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their footsteps synchronizing. Then Margaret added, her voice quieter, "You know what the worst part of getting old is? Everyone treats survival like it's the victory, like just waking up another day is something to celebrate. But we're not trying to survive. We're trying to figure out what we're still here for." Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest. A wall she had built years ago, suddenly showing fissures. Yes, exactly that. She had never heard anyone articulate it so perfectly. The loneliness wasn't just about missing people. It was about missing purpose, missing meaning, missing the sense that your existence mattered. "Maybe that's the point," Margaret said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Maybe we're here to figure that out together. Maybe that's why we keep running into each other on these ridiculous morning walks." Eleanor looked at her new friend and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not the big dramatic kind, the small, tentative kind that whispers maybe. Sarah called that evening during her weekly check-in, but it wasn't the dutiful, perfunctory call Eleanor had grown accustomed to. Sarah's voice sounded genuinely curious, engaged. "You sound different, Mom." "I feel different," Eleanor admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "I still don't know if stretching before coffee is some miracle cure, but it's given me time to think. Time between waking up and going through the motions." "What do you think about?" Sarah asked, and Eleanor could hear her daughter settling in, actually wanting to listen. Eleanor paused, watching the sunset through her window, the sky painted in oranges and purples. "That maybe I've been mourning the wrong things. I can't get your father back. I can't change that you live 3,000 miles away. But I can decide what happens in the time I have left. And a month ago, I almost didn't have any time left because I was too stubborn to change when I drank my coffee." She could hear Sarah's smile through the phone. Dr. Chen was right then, about the order of things mattering. "She was right about more than that," Eleanor said. "She was right that our bodies change, and we have to change with them. But also, when you change one small thing, other things shift too." "I met a friend, Margaret, from down the street. We walk together every morning now. I'm tasting my coffee instead of needing it. I'm reading again. I signed up for an art class at the senior center." "Mom, that's amazing." "It's not amazing," Eleanor corrected gently. "It's just different. I'm still sad sometimes. I still miss your father. I still wish you lived closer. But I'm not just surviving anymore." 3 months after her collapse, Eleanor stood in her kitchen at dawn. The brown stain was still there on the floor, faded now but still visible. She had decided to keep it as a reminder. She completed her stretches in the living room, the movements now familiar and grounding. Her body moved through them without the instruction sheet. She could reach her toes now, not easily but possible. Her shoulders rolled smoothly. She ate her breakfast, had learned to enjoy the quiet preparation. Today it was yogurt with berries, something she had discovered she liked. She took her time, tasting each bite, and then she made her coffee, savoring the ritual. She poured it into the white mug and carried it to the window, looking out at the morning. Margaret would arrive in 20 minutes for their walk. They had signed up for a senior community art class together, meeting twice a week. Eleanor had picked up a mystery novel she had been meaning to read for 5 years. Her life wasn't transformed. She was still 72, still widowed, still living alone in a house that was too big. But she was living, not just enduring. And it had started with something as simple as changing when she drank her coffee. The morning ritual was no longer about filling emptiness, about clinging desperately to the past. It was about creating space for something new to emerge, space between waking and routine, space for her body to prepare, space for possibilities she hadn't imagined. And in that space, Eleanor had found not happiness exactly, but something better, purpose in the small choices she made each morning, connection in unexpected places with people like Margaret, the understanding that even at 72, there was still time to begin again. She raised her mug toward the sunrise, a private gesture of gratitude. A quiet acknowledgement of second chances and the strange wisdom of doctors who understood that sometimes saving a life is about more than medicine. Sometimes it's about teaching someone that the order of things matters, that small changes ripple outward in ways you can't predict, that it's never too late to choose differently. Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, truly tasting it, and watched the sun climb higher. In 20 minutes, Margaret would knock on her door. They would walk their loop, maybe stop at the bakery afterward. This afternoon, the art class. This evening, another chapter of her book. Tomorrow, she would wake at 5:47 and do it all again. Not because it was miraculous, but because it worked. Because she had learned that caring for yourself isn't surrender. It's the first act of choosing to live instead of just existing.